Earlier this year, I was going into Nashville one morning, and I was on the interstate traveling at the posted speed limit, and I looked up in my rear view mirror and I could see that there was a car, and he was closing very quickly on me. When he got to my car, he swung around to the left-hand side of it, swung back around in front of it, almost hitting me. All of this within 300 or 400 yards of the next exit ramp, which of course where the driver got off the interstate or the expressway. As he went by the driver's side window and I looked at him, I could tell that this young man was sitting up on the edge of his seat. He had both hands on the steering wheel. He had a furrow in his brow. He did not look like someone that was ready for their day or was enjoying their day. He looked like someone that was just before being out of control. Now, being in the South, whenever we see someone like that, we naturally say, bless their hearts. And of course, bless our hearts means, well, it means a lot of different things in the South. But this particular day, I had empathy for that young man. And the reason I had empathy for that young man is because at one time, I was that guy. I was like that. I was almost out of control on a daily basis. And the reason that I was is because I was stuck in a career that I hadn't enjoyed for 10 or 12 years. You see, I'd been a banker for about 30 years, and as I said, for the last third of the career, it was just a job. I didn't enjoy it. It was drudgery going into work each day. I needed to make some changes, and I did. And oh, by the way, at that particular point in time, I was 100 pounds overweight. I weighed in excess of 350 pounds. The year that I left my banking career, I started my own consulting practice, Magnolia Management Partners. The year after I did that, I decided I wanted to lose 100 pounds, and I did. The year after that, I wrote a book about the experience, and the following year, I got that book published. As strange as it sounds, the past few years have been some of the most enjoyable ones of my life. You see, very few people change, most just adapt, and I'd been adapting for 20 years, and I did not like what I'd become. Now I hope to provide some insights and some encouragement so that you can make the changes that you would like to make to have a more healthy and fulfilling life. My career change wasn't the only catalyst for my weight loss. However, I don't think I could have realized such a dramatic lifestyle change and lost so much weight had I not changed careers. As I said earlier, for the past 10 years of my 30-year banking career, it became, well, it was just a job. It wasn't a career, and I was incredibly dissatisfied. The catalyst for my weight loss really came with two separate aha moments. One in February of one year, and the other a little bit later in the late summer, early fall. The first moment was in February when I was cleaning out some boxes and cleaning out some drawers in my house, and I ran across a picture that had been taken of me some 20 years earlier, and I was absolutely stunned at the picture because the person that I look like now did not resemble the person in the picture. Now, it was more than just the normal aging, the normal graying of hair, the things that we like to think make us distinguished looking. I looked like a different person. I was not the same person. And it was primarily because of the weight. In fact, it was all because of the weight. Again, I looked like somebody that I didn't recognize. The second aha moment was later in the summer, early fall. My son was in his 7th grade year of school, and he decided to play football. And I was quite proud of that because I played football back some years ago. And because of my excitement, I was going out to watch him practice 2 or 3 days a week. Very soon after I started watching practice and attending practice, met some of the other guys' parents. We all kind of knew who the other boys, who the kids were. And it was quite obvious that the boys knew who we were. We would watch practice either in the stadium or we would stand outside the fence on the practice fields. One day as we were driving home, my son said to me, he said, how come you got those shorts on? Why are you wearing those shorts to practice, Dad? As I said a moment ago, football practice was in the late summer, early fall, and of course it was hot. And after a working day, I changed into something more casual. And I said, well, son, I'm wearing these shorts, as I said, because it's more comfortable to me. He said, well, gosh, me and some of the guys were talking. I just don't think you need to be wearing those kinds of shorts. I pressed him a little bit further. And he reluctantly, finally, he said, I don't think you should be wearing those shorts, Dad. You're really too fat to be wearing those shorts. I was absolutely stunned by what he told me. And the reason I was stunned is because it was obvious that he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed by what I looked like. He was embarrassed by the fact that I had those shorts on. And it was quite obvious that some of the other boys had talked with him about that and about that, about that his dad was overweight. I didn't know what to say. Being told by your son that he was embarrassed by how you look was a tough pill to swallow. And even in my 50s, I still had a healthy ego, albeit bruised by what my son had told me. You see, I'd played football in the Southeastern Conference at Mississippi State. I was a 3-year letterman, having started some 27 consecutive games in the offensive line. Many regional and national publications said that I was one of the better offensive linemen in the conference, and some even said in the nation. Being an athlete and being athletic was what worked for me. My size and my body were part of my identity. But what my son had told me caused me to rethink all that. Because the fact of the matter was, I looked old and I looked unhealthy and I looked beyond my years, and it was all because I was overweight. I looked like one of those people that we all see in the mall from time to time that we look at and silently have some contempt or disdain for, because we look at them and think to ourselves, how could they let themselves get like that? Well, I'd gotten like that, and I don't know why, but it was the first time in a long time that I really recognized me for who I was. I was overweight, I was unhealthy looking, and I needed to make some changes. The fact of the matter was, I'd chose to ignore my condition for many years. It'd been a long time since I'd had a real good night's sleep. I couldn't go up or down a flight of stairs without it being a chore. I couldn't even walk our dogs without being exerted. And I certainly couldn't jog or run any length of time. Furthermore, I'd been lying to myself about my not-so-subtle change in wardrobe. It'd been many years since I could walk into any retail clothing store or any store in the mall and buy something off the rack. 4 years prior to my son's request, in a visit with my physician, he told me, he said, Mark, he said, you know, he said, your weight is starting to cause you some problems. In fact, during that visit, he prescribed high blood pressure medicine because I'd become hypertensive. And he told me, he said, you know, the combination of the weight, the hypertensity, the natural aging process, sooner or later your quality of life is going to deteriorate. Now, I don't know why it took me so long to get it, because again, it was 4 years from that conversation or that meeting with my physician, 4 years between that and what my son had told me. The irony was that one time I worked at being big. I worked at being very big. When I played football, I used to talk about the fact that, you know, I weighed 280 pounds or I weighed 285 pounds, and it frankly rolled off the end of my tongue with some degree of cadence whenever I tell somebody my height and my weight. As I said, now I'd become a liability. Now I'd become something that was actually going to impact me in a negative way going forward. I played football for over 10 years of my life. And almost every coach I played for expected 2 or 3 different things. They expected that I be disciplined. They expected that I work hard. They expected that I have self-control and that I have willpower. I can tell you that most of the practice time through those 10 years wasn't spent under the watchful eye of coaches, or certainly any adoring fans. Most of the practice time was spent in a weight room by myself or on a practice field by myself, perfecting strength, perfecting footwork, or just trying to get in shape. What those experiences taught me was this, is that success is typically not realized in the limelight. Success is not typically realized in front of a bunch of adoring fans. Success is typically realized in the solitude of hard work and discipline. Playing a sport taught me a lot about life, and it taught me a lot about myself. I can tell you that I was not a gifted athlete. I had to work very hard, and I had to work hard at it. Nothing came naturally. I can also tell you that making the changes that I made and losing 100 pounds, that did not come easy either. I had to work, and I had to work hard at it. Success in making the changes that I made and losing 100 pounds was almost entirely attributed to me maintaining mental toughness and keeping a laser focus on my stated goal. My physician once explained to me that losing weight was a function of how much you ate and how much you burned. Calories in, calories out, or calories burned. He also said that in order to be successful in losing weight, I need to do a better job of managing the number of calories that I consumed each day. Now, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say that a calorie is defined as a unit of energy supplied by food. The CDC also says that a calorie is a calorie regardless of its source. Whether it's a carbohydrate, whether it's a protein, whether it's a fat, whether it's a sugar, they're all calories. And if you eat more than is burned, you will store those extra calories and you'll put on weight. If you eat less than is burned, your body will use the stored calories for energy and you'll lose weight. It's really a simple mathematical calculation. The CDC also says that 1 pound equals 3,500 calories. That means that for every pound that I wanted to lose, I needed to burn that many calories. While I could increase daily physical activity, it seemed unrealistic that I could increase it to the level needed to lose weight without any meaningful reduction in calories. For example, at the time I weighed 350 pounds, and a 350-pound person walking for 30 minutes at 3 miles an hour would only burn 346 calories. Based on that calculation, I'd have to walk some 5 hours a day just to lose 1 pound, and that was before I ate one bite of food. The resting metabolic rate, or RMR, is a generally accepted scientific equation used to estimate the number of calories the body burns simply by living. The formula is a somewhat complicated function of age, activity, gender, height, and weight. The RMR calculation does not take into account body composition or the measure of the percentages of muscle and fat. Generally speaking, most people that consistently consume more calories than they burn will gain weight. If they consistently consume less than they're burning, they will lose weight. It should be noted that the parameters for gender, age, and height are ignored in calculating calories burned. However, the RMR can be influenced by physical activity and exercise. A number of different sources indicated that based on my age, height, weight, and level of daily physical activity, my body was burning around 3,400 to 3,500 calories a day simply by living. In other words, that's what it was taking to maintain my weight at 350 pounds. My RMR goal at my target weight of 250 pounds was around 2,800 calories. Now, I used this methodology to lose 100 pounds in some 229 days. During those 7.5 months, I exercised very little. In fact, I exercised hardly at all. My weight loss was almost entirely attributed to caloric management. For example, over time, I averaged consuming around 2,100 calories a day. In other words, I consumed only 60% of my starting resting metabolic rate and about 75% of my target resting metabolic rate. It wasn't what I'd been consuming, it was the how much that I'd been consuming. During the 7.5 month period that I lost 100 pounds, I still ate pizza, but I just didn't eat an entire 14-inch pie at one sitting. I'd have 1 or 2 or 3 pieces, and then I'd stop. I still had bread, I still had red and white meat, I still ate tortilla chips, and yes, the bread was buttered. I also enjoyed ice cream during this time period, and it was the real thing, it wasn't the diet ice cream. What I found was that I had to manage what I was eating, and I had to give some forethought and some planning to what I ate and when I ate it. There were 3 rules that I followed in losing the weight over this 7.5 month period. First, I was diligent in recording and keeping up with what I ate and drank every day and at every meal. In other words, I journaled. I maintained this information as though my life depended on it. Most successful business people will tell you if you don't track it, then you can't manage it. Of course, these references are typically to cash or money coming in and out of a business. However, I believe that the same approach and thinking can be and should apply to weight and physical activity. Secondly, I stayed within my established daily food budget. Just like a checking account, I didn't need to spend more than I had. Most of us have certain fixed expenses, such as a mortgage payment, household utilities, insurance, and our monthly budgets that have to be paid. Each month after these basic expenses are covered, we then have some discretionary cash to spend. If you spend beyond your means, you're going to create financial problems that will require time, effort, and most likely come with some cost to correct. The same basic approach applies to overconsumption of food and drink. In my mind, financial and caloric management are so similar in that there's always a cost associated with excesses. Additionally, if problems arising from either cannot be changed, corrected, or modified quickly or overnight. Finally, I needed to know what I was eating at all times. If I didn't know the caloric content of something, I did not eat it. If I couldn't calculate how many calories were in anything, I simply passed on it. It's kind of like if you ask your neighbor's kid to mow your lawn and you didn't ask them how much they were going to charge before they mowed the lawn, and they came to the door after the job was done and said, oh, by the way, that's going to be $2,500, you'd feel pretty foolish, wouldn't you? Frankly, I didn't know about the resting metabolic rate when I decided I was going to lose 100 pounds, and I certainly didn't know it was going to be an integral part of my weight loss strategy. I still journal caloric consumption, and I manage that number to my daily RMR. I do this because keeping it off is actually harder than losing it to start with, and there's a clinical reason for that. You see, everyone's resting metabolic rate actually decreases with age and as their height goes down. With age, bones tend to shrink in size and in density, and you even become a little bit shorter. In other words, as the body ages, it requires less fuel, regardless of physical activity and weight. Therefore, losing weight or maintaining a healthy weight is more difficult the older you get. Also, muscle mass tends to decrease with age, which leads to an increase in fat. Since fat tissue burns fewer calories than does muscle, most people need to reduce the number of calories or increase physical activity simply to maintain their weight. Either way, you must remain vigilant. Once I made the first change, the career change, the next few changes seemed to come easier. Now that's not to say they weren't without challenge, and that's not to say they weren't without sacrifice, because in order to make those changes, I had to get out of my comfort zone. I think any time that you commit to some type of major lifestyle change, you're going to be out of your comfort zone. Anytime you take a different direction as it relates to a life or lifestyle, you're going to be out of a comfort zone. But don't be one of those that just adapts. Challenge yourself to be bold. Challenge yourself to have the courage to make changes.